Since 1989, DNA evidence has freed more than 300 people convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. 17 of them spent time on death row and narrowly escaped the death penalty. That number is almost certainly higher than those figures because the technology to free someone based on DNA evidence didn't even exist prior to the 1980s. Experts say the increase in wrongful convictions isn't due to more errors, but because more people are looking for those mistakes. News 19's Jenna Rowe introduces you to a Sparta man who was set free due to DNA evidence, but even today, nearly 20 years later, struggles to lead a normal life. Jenna?
Scott, time is not the only thing people lose when they're sent to prison for a crime they did not commit. They lose their job, often their family and friends, and their dignity. While Fred Saker's conviction may have been overturned, he still struggles to get out from under the shadow of that wrongful conviction.
The board concludes that the evidence is clear, satisfactory, and convincing that the prisoner was innocent of the crime for which he suffered imprisonment.
Fred Saker never thought it would happen to him. Locked up for 7 years for a crime he didn't commit.
You have full trust in judges and law enforcement, and that everything's going to come to light and everything will be right and justice will be served.
But the system failed, and justice for Saker wasn't served. He was arrested in June of 1989. Later, a jury found him guilty of kidnapping, sexual assault, and burglary.
Trying to figure out what you did, why it happened, what was wrong, just anything.
Saker says he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was convicted on circumstantial evidence after being seen walking on a highway near where the victim was kidnapped. He was intoxicated and did not recall his actions that night. But Saker was not picked out of the lineup and did not fit the victim's description of the suspect. A year into Saker's 50-year prison sentence, his mom wrote a letter to the Buffalo County Public Defender.
She somehow explained to them that I was innocent, and they took an interest in it and started investigating the case.
DNA evidence found on the victim's underwear the night of the crime did not match Saker's.
You don't expect the system to fail in this respect.
Saker was freed in 1996. The actual culprit was never found.
I continue to have issues that are just post-traumatic stress, psychological things that happen to you, triggers that you can't really explain.
But now, as an advocate for the Wisconsin Innocence Project, Saker is dedicated to making change. Since 1998, the UW Law School's Wisconsin Innocence Project has freed 21 people from crimes they did not commit, and they say their work is far from done. A group of UW Law students works to prove their clients' innocence and to understand where the system went wrong.
The criminal justice system is a very high-stakes enterprise, but it's a human enterprise, so it's bound to make mistakes.
Keith Finley, co-director of the Wisconsin Innocence Project, says the state is decades behind others when it comes to compensating those wrongfully convicted.
There are few things that the government can do to an individual that are more horrific than to take away somebody's liberty, to lock them up in prison for a crime they didn't commit.
Many of these men have been let out with no clothes, $1 in their pocket, and that's it. And they just got to go back out into society and find their way.
The Wisconsin Claims Board awarded Saker $25,000. Under Wisconsin law, exonerees can receive $5,000 for every year spent wrongfully in prison. But it's capped at $25,000, half of the state's annual median family income. And lawmakers argue it's not nearly enough.
We hear about how they have foregone starting a family, how they have foregone spending time with their family they have now.
Saker testified in Madison on behalf of Representative Dale Koinga's bill that would allow the Wisconsin Claims Court to give an exoneree $50,000 a year, up to $1 million, along with job training, health care benefits, and financial literacy training. But the bill died in the state Senate, in part because it allowed for court records to be sealed at the defendant's request.
I know what the problem is now in the bill. I know what the concerns are. I will be taking that portion of the bill out in order to compromise, in order to get the overall bill passed.
Nearly 20 years later, Saker says he's come to terms with what happened.
It isn't the particular people that made that happen that are responsible for it. It's the evil in the world. And it's more or less a battle of good against evil. And sometimes evil wins.
But everyone has a role in fighting back.
It can happen to anybody, and we should all be working to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Saker got his second chance, and now he's making sure others get theirs too.
Saker says he's finally at peace with where he is in his life. He has a reliable job at a Sparta factory and is very involved with his church. He tells me he will continue to work with both the Innocence Project and lawmakers to be sure those wrongfully convicted are compensated for the years that were taken from them. One other thing to note, I did reach out to James Duvall, the district attorney in Buffalo County at the time Saker was convicted. Duvall now sits as Circuit County judge and declined to talk to me because of his current role. Scott.
Thanks, Jenna. As she told you, the state claims board did award Saker $25,000 in compensation, but not all exonerees are awarded that compensation by the Wisconsin Claims Board. They must be proven actually innocent of the crime, not just wrongfully convicted for, say, lack of evidence.